We shall fight in the field.
Mit der Akzeptanz der
C'était pas parce que les
4
Britanniques
Grundfreiheiten und dazu gehört
ont
auch
décidé
die
de sortir qu'ils ne doivent pas
Freizügigkeit
être
der
associés à ce
Personen.
processus.
Brexit means Brexit.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Brexitometer. We are recording today on a pretty important day for Brexit and by extension for the Brexitometer because today, as we are recording this, the European Parliament has voted to ratify the EU-UK trade agreement, bringing Brexit to an official close after 5 years of referendum, elections, acrimony, cliffhangers, drama, and everything in between. Of course, Brexit is not over. As we've said many times before in the Brexitometer, Brexit is a permanent condition. Brexit is always with us. We actually saw that a few weeks ago with some very unpleasant riots in Belfast, in Northern Ireland. Now, of course, riots in Northern Ireland have their own internal causes, but it was a good reminder that Brexit itself is not making things easy there. As we speak, the EU and the UK are in constant renegotiations about how to apply the Northern Ireland Protocol. Northern Ireland was always the big bone of contention of Brexit, and it continues to do so after the two sides have reached an agreement. But beyond that, life seems to be going back to normal a bit, and what better way to understand that life is back to normal when actually the political news of the day in London concerns scandals and football. You know, when everyone's talking about scandals in football, that we're now back to our nice situation where quite insignificant news are making the big news. So what are people talking about in London, and how do they relate with Brexit and the other big crisis of our day, the pandemic? Let's go have a look. It feels almost like it was a decade ago, but it was only a few months, 6 months ago, when Boris Johnson had to navigate this ginormous double crisis of Brexit and the pandemic. Today, both of those crises seem to be receding. Brexit is formally over. The pandemic in the UK has come under control thanks to the success of the vaccination program of the UK, which of course leaves a lot of space for Boris Johnson to enjoy a new period of political hegemony, or rather for Boris to actually be engulfed in a series of scandals. Over the last couple of weeks, Westminster is full of stories about corruption, sleaze, leaks. Generally, the floor seems to be coming out from underneath Boris's feet just the moment where he actually thought that he had stuff coming under control. The source of all of the problems is actually Dominic Cummings, the infamous advisor of Boris Johnson, who was ousted from Downing Street a few months ago. And over the last couple of weeks, pretty much everybody points the finger at Cummings for leaking all kinds of incendiary things about the Boris Johnson government. One is a scandal about Boris using donor and party funds to refurbish the Prime Minister residence, even though he claimed that he actually covered the expenses himself. Another is the infamous remark, although we don't really know much about it, but people are talking about it, that Boris said back in November that he didn't want to impose another lockdown against COVID, even if that meant Boris would start piling up. A very bad look for a government that did have a success with the vaccination program, but also has a very large death toll because of the pandemic. We don't really know where all of this will lead. We don't know where truth ends and where Dominic Cummings' desire for revenge begins. But what I do sense is that there is a severe problem with Boris's slightly chaotic and slightly eccentric leadership style. And paradoxically, that eccentric leadership style felt a bit appropriate for a country that was in a constant state of crisis, whether because of Brexit or because of the pandemic. So now the question is, if the UK is entering a more normal period, will the British people start thinking that perhaps they deserve a more normal Prime Minister? I think we're far away from Boris losing power yet, but I think the first real questions about his style of leadership have started emerging. The other major news item of the last couple of weeks was, of course, the aborted attempt to create a European Super League in European football. And this pertains to the UK a lot because, of course, 6 of the 12 clubs that had announced that they wanted to create a Super League came from England. 3 clubs that actually are good, Liverpool, Manchester City and Chelsea. 2 clubs that used to be good but cannot accept that they're not that good anymore, Manchester United and Arsenal. And 1 club that, as far as I remember, was never good, but for some reason they were included, Tottenham. Anyway, the point is that what we saw, as we saw the European Super League unraveling, we have to acknowledge that basically the Super League died in England, right? Because it was in England where you had the harshest reactions, not only from the Premier League and from Sky TV and from all the financial interests that were opposed to the Super League, but by the fans. It was the fans themselves who mobilized quite a lot on social media, but also outside of stadiums, and they really sent a signal, sending letters to their teams, sending a signal that they don't like the idea of the Super League. I think the Super League was an opportunity for English fans to vent their frustration with the severe commercialization of football in this country after all those years, and the Super League experiment gave them the opportunity. And because of this pressure, English teams, one after the other, started abandoning the Super League, and in the end only Real Madrid and Juventus were left, and the whole thing folded. The Boris Johnson government very wisely understood what the people wanted, very wisely stood up against the Super League. For a couple of days this was the #1 political story in the country, and now there's even talk about further reform in English football, for example assigning an independent regulator of English football. Generally, when it comes to football, England is really at the forefront of whatever happens internationally, and I think this story and the important role that England played in shaping a development that would affect football across Europe is perhaps an analogy or a parable about things that the UK may continue influencing in its relationship with the EU. So the European Super League story is a good story to remind ourselves that the UK will always be relevant for the EU. Perhaps not in all areas, but in some areas we will have to be listening to what the UK has to say. So this was another Brexitometer. As you can see, Brexit is slowly turning from a political issue into a background condition. A bit like face masks, we are by now used to living with Brexit, and we only realize it's there if it becomes annoying for some reason or other. Of course, political developments in the UK never end, and many of them will be determined and will be conditioned by the effect of Brexit. We have elections in Scotland very soon, which may lead to a new round of constitutional acrimony, perhaps another referendum. And of course, this relates a lot to the debate about the relationship of the UK with the EU and Scotland's place in the United Kingdom and in relationship to Europe. We have the UK and the EU increasingly crossing paths with each other in global governance and international issues such as climate, the nuclear deal with Iran, or their ambitions in the Asia Pacific. Generally, there's a lot of things to chew on, and the relationship never ends. It is now defined by Brexit, and of course we will always be here, the Brexitometer will always be here to analyze it. Until the next time, hopefully the great weather will continue. You can always be sending me your questions using the hashtag Brexitometer on all social media. Until next time, take care, and if you have the opportunity and you're offered one, do get a COVID vaccine.
We shall fight in the field.
Mit der Akzeptanz der
C'est pas parce que les
4
Britanniques
Grundfreiheiten, und dazu gehört
ont
auch
décidé
die
de sortir qu'ils ne doivent pas
Freizügigkeit
être
der
associés dans ce
Personen.
processus.
Brexit means Brexit.